An ordinary meal has suddenly become a luxury item. Ironically, while restaurants are trying to maximize revenue, a wave of major brands is heading toward bankruptcy. These seemingly unusual developments are now becoming a widespread trend across the United States. In 2025 alone, more than 5,000 food service locations in the U.S. permanently shut down, leaving behind empty storefronts and serious questions about the survival of the industry. So, where is the money actually going? Why are we gradually abandoning the habit of dining out? And what is really hidden behind this trillion-dollar industry? In the next few minutes, you'll realize the issue isn't just inflation, but a far more dangerous toxin. Something most people still haven't truly seen. You may have noticed that according to Consumer Price Index (CPI) data, the cost of dining out in the U.S. is rising about 4% faster than cooking at home. Restaurants panicking as labor costs and rent in major cities have surged by 50% to 70% over the past few years, have made a rather bold move raising prices across the board. But instead of filling their budgets, they've unintentionally created a trap for themselves. With ingredient costs rising as much as 3,550%, pushing prices higher has reduced how often customers visit. According to recent reports, nearly 40% of Americans have cut back on eating out over the past year. It's a downward spiral. The fewer customers they have, the more restaurants struggle to raise prices to maintain profits, which drives customers even further away. In the past, dining out was a pleasure, a form of entertainment after a long work week. Now, it feels more like a risky investment. You spend money on breakfast at popular chains or dinner at places that were once iconic like Red Lobster or TGI Fridays. But what do you get in return? Smaller portions with shrinkflation reducing serving sizes by 10–20% and a mediocre experience. The feeling of regret after paying is hard to avoid because the value you receive no longer matches the dollars you work so hard to earn. Doesn't it seem strange that even people who once spared no expense on dining experiences are now becoming more selective? In fact, 8 out of 10 Americans have noticed significant restaurant price increases over the past 12 months, and they're starting to question the true value of each meal. We're no longer as easygoing as before. We want value for our money. A meal now has to be transparent from ingredients to cost. While many people are choosing to return to their home kitchens where they fully control food quality and never have to deal with hidden service fees or experience fees that can make up 15–30% of the bill, the market is also seeing a major shift. Meal kit services and convenience stores seem to understand consumers better than traditional restaurants. They offer transparency, convenience, and most importantly, they don't force you to pay for experiences you never asked for. We haven't disappeared because we lack money. You're still here, still willing to spend, but only for respect and real quality. When a restaurant treats customers as a revenue source to compensate for operational inefficiencies, it's essentially digging its own grave. Perhaps what we're witnessing is a harsh but natural selection process. Business models that stubbornly cling to outdated operations, lack transparency, and disregard customer experience will soon give way to those that listen more carefully. In the end, a meal is not just food on a plate. It's a promise of value. If a restaurant can't fulfill that promise, then its disappearance from your dining map is only natural. Isn't it? Have you ever sat down at a table, ordered a familiar dish you've eaten for decades, and wondered why the plate looks emptier? Or why the piece of meat suddenly seems a bit more modest? Welcome to the era of shrinkflation, a subtle magic trick in the food service industry, where what disappears isn't the money in your wallet, but the portion on your plate. This phenomenon is no longer rare. Many major fast food chains have quietly adjusted portion sizes, making the burgers you once loved lighter by 10–20% while prices stay the same or even increase. And it doesn't stop there. The fries or side vegetables look as if they've just gone through a forced diet as well. For those who are used to the old standards, this experience is genuinely frustrating. We're not being picky. We're being discerning. When you realize you're paying more for a poorer experience, the feeling of being undervalued is hard to avoid. The contrast between past standards and present-day pragmatism creates a widening gap between diners and brands. When major brands overuse this tactic, they unintentionally erode the very brand value they worked so hard to build. From iconic dining destinations they gradually turn themselves into simple food distribution stations. And the result, a chain reaction. You no longer feel connected. You're no longer loyal. Instead, you start turning to alternatives like cooking at home or using meal kit services where you're in control, managing quality, and knowing exactly what you're eating. Cutting portions and quality may help some restaurants survive temporarily under cost pressure, but it's a short-term gamble with a high price, destroying the invisible but strong bond with customers. The market seems to be undergoing a harsh cleansing. Businesses that stubbornly stick to these cutback strategies will soon realize that today's consumers are not easily fooled. Transparency is becoming the new luxury, and those who can't provide it may soon become part of the past. When we walk into a restaurant, we expect the listed price on the menu to be the final amount we pay. But many places are playing a different game. They use these search charges as an optimization tool to increase revenue without changing the numbers on the menu, a way to avoid customer pushback on listed prices. They indirectly shift operating costs from insurance and employee wages to electricity and water onto you. Notably, these so-called junk fees are becoming more common. According to some recent reports in the U.S. service industry, these off-men charges can account for 15% to 30% of a bill. If tipping is your voluntary way of rewarding service, then these hidden fees feel more like a pre-programmed mandatory tax. Do you feel like you're being turned into an unwilling investor in their operating costs? The feeling of being trapped is hard to avoid. You've already finished your meal and now you're stuck. Either pay up or face the awkwardness of arguing on the spot. Suspicion begins to grow, and it's no surprise that negative reviews are flooding platforms like Yelp or Google Reviews, where keywords like hidden fees or surprise search charge are appearing more frequently than ever. When trust is eroded by unfamiliar charges, the unspoken agreement between seller and buyer breaks down. Do you still feel comfortable dining out when you have to scrutinize the bill like you're reviewing a complex insurance contract? This lack of transparency is completely changing how we spend. Instead of enjoying a meal as a pleasure, you shift into defensive mode. You check bills more carefully. You prioritize places with clear pricing and gradually move away from brands that seem to be subtly overcharging customers. This is nothing less than a toxin seeping into dining transactions. While restaurants may appreciate the thin margins gained from these fees, the cost is your loyalty. Is trading long-term customer relationships for a few extra charges really a smart move? Perhaps the market is entering a cleansing phase as pricing transparency laws are gradually tightened in many states. These tricky business models will soon face a harsh reality. In the end, you, the one who pays, hold the ultimate power to decide who survives on the American dining map. Imagine this. You walk into a coffee shop, quickly order a latte, and then the touchscreen swivels toward you with tip options starting at 20%, 25%, even 30%. What just happened? Are we really being asked to pay extra just because an employee turned around and pressed a few buttons on the machine? Tip fatigue is creeping into every corner, from self-service kiosks at chains like Panera Bread or Starbucks to even takeout counters, displaying high tip options directly on the payment screen in front of staff unintentionally creates psychological pressure. It's no longer a reward for excellent service. It feels more like a kind of hidden tax you're expected to pay if you want to avoid an awkward moment. Have you noticed your dinners lately feel heavier? Before even ordering, instead of enjoying the atmosphere or the menu, you find yourself mentally calculating the final cost after adding taxes and the suggested tip. A meal, which should be a time to relax, has turned into a series of purely transactional decisions. More importantly, restaurants are shifting the responsibility of paying their employees onto you, the customer. While food prices have already surged to cover costs, tipping becomes an excuse for them to avoid paying fair wages. The result is that you feel emotionally extorted. Even when service is average or poor, not tipping still makes you feel like a villain in the eyes of society. When tipping becomes the default, the value of genuine, attentive service fades. Those who perform well are no longer favored over those who just do the bare minimum because that 20% is already preset. Have you ever wondered whether the extra money you leave actually reaches the staff, or if it quietly flows into the owner's pocket to offset other operating costs? This lack of transparency creates a wall of skepticism between business owners and customers. It's no surprise that no-tip or reduced tipping movements are beginning to emerge in many places. It's not because people are cheap, but because they are reacting to a system that has gradually lost its fairness. The warmth of human interaction is being replaced by lifeless numbers on a tablet screen. Perhaps the restaurant industry is making things harder for itself if it continues to commodify meals without real improvements in quality. Will diners have any reason to return? Maybe it's time for a restructuring where employee wages are honestly built into menu prices instead of forcing you to act as the one paying their salaries every time you want to enjoy a good meal. What do you think about this? Have you ever felt overwhelmed by excessive tipping screens? Or do you still maintain traditional tipping habits despite these changes? Share your thoughts. Maybe we'll find we have the same perspective on this evolving so-called tipping culture. Let's face reality. The modern kitchen is no longer a place where culinary artists carefully craft each ingredient. Instead, it's gradually becoming an assembly line. With help from major food suppliers like Cisco or US Foods, many restaurants have abandoned traditional cooking. Instead of requiring skills like prepping, slicing, or slow cooking for hours, they just need an employee who can press the microwave or reheating machine quickly. Traditional cooking techniques that once defined culinary identity are fading away. Why hire a skilled chef at a high salary when you can buy prepackaged sauces or pre-processed cuts of meat from a factory? It may seem like a perfect optimization move economically, but is that really what you want to see on your plate? The suspicious similarity in flavors is no coincidence. To save time and reduce the risk of errors, a wide range of items from sauces and soups to ground meat are mass-produced in centralized factories. Preservatives, flavor enhancers, and thickeners are added to maintain a safe taste and industrial uniformity that becomes tiresome. You're paying for a meal advertised as house-made, but in reality it may just be reheated. The missing depth of flavor, the natural sweetness of fresh vegetables, or the richness of slow-cooked meat is something industrial food products can never replicate. Why are restaurants doing this? The answer lies in the pressure for fast profits. As labor costs soar, cutting training and staffing expenses becomes a practical choice. Instead of focusing on quality, they focus on turnover. They need you to eat quickly, pay quickly, and leave so the next customer can take your place. But the cost of this model is your loyalty. When a restaurant treats a meal as a uniform commodity instead of a cultural experience, it unintentionally pushes its customers away. Do you feel disappointed realizing that after years of loyalty, the so-called identity of a favorite brand is just the product of a mass production line? Dependence on industrial processing seems like a toxic dose for culinary diversity. Interestingly, people like you are becoming more discerning as you realize you're being served an assembled product. The trend toward farm-toteable models or places that are transparent about their cooking processes is growing stronger. Perhaps the restaurant industry is facing an identity crisis. If these brands don't change and return to authenticity, they may soon realize that their customers, those who understand the true value of a real meal, are gradually leaving in search of something more genuine. You've probably seen it before. A familiar name, a restaurant chain your family used to visit every weekend, suddenly announcing mass closures or filing for bankruptcy. That's not a coincidence. It's the result of a death spiral that many major U.S. restaurant groups are systematically falling into. As labor costs rise, ingredient prices climb, and rent in prime locations becomes increasingly unreasonable, their profit margins begin to shrink like a piece of meat on a hot pan. Instead of stepping back and figuring out how to operate more efficiently, many chains choose the quickest way out, raising menu prices. But you know this, customers aren't naive. When prices spike while quality becomes bland, we the ones holding the wallets react immediately. We start looking for more practical options or simply cook at home. As customer traffic drops, revenue falls, but fixed costs like loan interest and rent remain unchanged. So, they respond by raising prices again or cutting portions. You see it now. It's a perfect domino spiral. And you already know how it ends. Bankruptcy. Many large chains like Red Lobster and similar brands often operate on massive debt. They borrow to expand rapidly to chase scale. In today's high-interest environment, Restructuring that debt becomes so expensive that it drains all the cash flow that should have been used to invest in service quality. The traditional restaurant model with large spaces and bloated staff is becoming an oversized framework in the modern era. While fast service chains use technology to optimize costs and capture market share, these slower giants are still struggling with outdated menus. It's as if they're trying to race on foot while their competitors have already taken off in airplanes. There's one detail you may not have noticed: the involvement of private equity firms. Sometimes they acquire restaurant chains not to improve your dining experience, but to extract short-term profits. They apply strategies like selling off restaurant real estate and then leasing it back to generate working capital. The result is higher long-term rent costs, creating intense pressure on daily operations. When the ultimate goal becomes quarterly financial reports instead of customer satisfaction, declining quality is only a matter of time. Perhaps the issue isn't that we don't want to eat out anymore, but that the management model has become outdated, too focused on growth at all costs. The collapse of these once iconic brands may be a necessary wake-up call. The dining market is undergoing a harsh cleansing. Chains that still rely on pricing tricks to cover operational weaknesses will likely have to make way for leaner, more transparent, and more genuine models. In the end, no financial strategy can replace the trust a customer feels when they set their plate down after a satisfying meal. Gone are the days when cooking at home was seen as a last resort for tight budgets. Now, cooking at home feels like a statement of personal control. With the help of appliances like an air fryer or an instant pot, preparing a quality meal is no longer a time burden. You choose the ingredients, you control the seasoning, and most importantly, you don't have to pay an extra 20% tip or some vague infrastructure fee just to sit down and eat. When you look at nutrition and food sources, do you feel more confident preparing it yourself rather than trusting the menus of overly industrialized restaurant chains? If you still want convenience without feeling overcharged by hidden costs, meal kit services seem to be an appealing solution. They deliver prepped ingredients and measured portions right to your door. And best of all, they offer pricing transparency. No surprises on the bill. No experience fees that make you raise an eyebrow. This may be the model many people are looking for. A bit of the joy of cooking while still ensuring health and fairness in spending. Have you noticed how food trucks are becoming more appealing than mid-range restaurants? Simply because the person cooking is often the owner. They don't have the budget for large marketing teams. They can only focus on the one thing that brings customers in: food quality. These trucks focus on specialization, maybe just a signature taco or a regional steak recipe. You're not paying for expensive rent in New York or Miami. You're paying for fresh ingredients and the care of the person cooking. It's a direct interaction, a connection that large chains with sprawling menus can hardly replicate. It seems our spending is shifting more consciously. We're not stopping eating out. We're just stopping paying for things that aren't worth it. The casual dining segment may be facing the greatest challenge. When it can't prove superior value compared to a homemade steak or a flavorful meal from a nearby food truck, it loses its reason to exist. We are becoming smarter diners. We save special occasions for refined experiences and reserve everyday meals for transparency, quality, and financial control. This isn't a temporary fluctuation. It's likely a necessary market adjustment. In the end, when power returns to the paying customer, businesses that value transparency, quality, and identity will find their place. As for those that rely on hidden fees or assembled food products, they should probably start worrying. The U.S. dining market is undergoing a harsh natural elimination process where the collapse of bloated debt-laden brands is no longer surprising. In this new era, survival may belong only to those willing to make authenticity their guiding principle. Have you noticed the places that are still standing are the ones unafraid to disclose their ingredient sources and cooking processes? They don't try to hide behind flashy terminology. They understand that today's consumers, who are already used to seeing through the marketing tactics of large corporations, are willing to pay for real value, not for assembled meals that are simply reheated. Absolute transparency is no longer optional. It has likely become the only ticket to retaining customers. While large restaurant chains struggle under the burden of debt from private equity firms, independent restaurants are finding renewed vitality. Have you noticed how small neighborhood spots are becoming more lively? They don't have grand buildings or flashy signage, but they have community connection, something you can hardly find in any industrial chain. They operate lean. They use technology only to serve better food, not to cut your portions. They are part of the local fabric where you don't just go to eat, but to feel a space with soul. This is not an industrial meal assembled from Cisco or US Foods, but a deeply human interaction. This shift didn't happen on its own. It comes from you, the one holding the wallet, the one who understands the value of money and personal dignity. You are no longer a passive customer. Your reviews on online platforms and your smarter spending choices are creating enormous pressure. When you firmly reject hidden fees or poor service, you are forcing the entire supply chain from farms to suppliers to change. This may be a necessary cleansing. It removes outdated practices and deceptive food tactics, making room for more sustainable values. The restaurant industry may be entering an era of truth. The brands that survive this cleansing won't be those best at financial tricks, but those that prioritize integrity and quality. This is not the decline of dining culture, but perhaps a necessary rebirth. What do you think? Are we entering a time where authenticity becomes the only measure of success? Are home-cooked meals or small, passionate eateries gradually replacing the habit of dining at large familiar chains? Perhaps when real values are honored, we'll rediscover the joy in every meal the way it was always meant to be. Looking at the bigger picture, you can probably see that the U.S. restaurant industry is going through a quiet but brutal cleansing. Prices are rising, operating costs are surging, while the quality of the experience shows signs of decline, and portion sizes are becoming increasingly modest. All of these factors unintentionally create a paradox. We still have the financial means, but we no longer want to pull out our wallets for dining out. What about you? Have you ever picked up a bill and asked yourself, was this meal really worth it? Do you feel that today's dining experiences still match the money you spend? If you were a restaurant owner, what would you change to make customers want to come back? Share your real stories and experiences in the comments below. I'd really like to hear your perspective. If you find this analysis helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss in-depth analyses, surprising statistics, and interesting insights about the food industry and lifestyle in the US. The content in this video is for analytical, informational, and educational purposes only, based on personal experiences, public data, and market research. We do not intend to target any specific individual or brand. Each viewer should form their own opinions and decisions based on their own real experiences. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next videos.